Hey, this is Dr. Force with Hitting Home. A few weeks ago, we conducted a marriage conference in Cuba, Missouri. The conference went incredible, and we're just very thankful for that. But during the conference, especially the end of the first session, I started to make a few remarks regarding divorce, remarriage, and adultery. One of the things that I noticed is that as I started to simply quote the words of Christ, there was a tension that built up in the room. And in chapter 2 of our marriage book, How to Fight for Your Marriage Without Fighting with One Another, I talk about how when Jesus dealt with marriage, in fact, the subject of marriage honestly isn't dealt with that much in the Bible in relation to other subjects. But in Matthew 5 and in Matthew chapter 19, when Jesus dealt with the subject of marriage, it's absolutely amazing to me that the very topic that we will either deal with last or we won't deal with it at all, when Jesus conducted a marriage conference, as I mentioned in chapter 2 of our marriage book, Jesus dealt with this very subject first. He gave us the mind of God concerning marriage, divorce, and adultery. And Jesus pointed out that a light view of marriage will lead to the heavy sin of adultery. And I realize there are some of us that are in extremely difficult circumstances today. I understand that there are some of you that want your marriage, or you wanted your marriage, and your spouse made decisions that went against what you wanted, what you believe that God wanted. However, one of the things that I make mention in the marriage book, and this is where at our marriage conferences, you can feel the tension in the room. And when you bring up simply a subject and you can feel tension in the room, that's usually a good sign that that's what we need to deal with. And one of the things that we say in our marriage book in chapter 2 is that the only difference between a number, and notice every word is very carefully chosen here, but the only difference between a number and many of our divorce and remarriage cases and outright adultery is simply time and a piece of paper in a courthouse. And as I go through this at a marriage conference, it's amazing how you can feel the tension build in the room. It's as if people are testing you to see if you're going to say what Christ said. But there's often a release because people are waiting for people to validate what God said all along. Once again, I understand that there are some of you in very, very difficult circumstances. But honestly, we have to just look around and realize that even in the Christian realm today, we have what I call legalized spouse swapping. People leaving their spouse because they're not happy. People leaving their spouse because they're not connected. And to be quite honest with you, if we want to quote the verse, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and apply that to healing, apply that to God's sovereignty, apply that to God's power, we also have to apply that to Matthew chapter 5 and also Matthew chapter 19. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And let's understand that when Jesus dealt with marriage, the very subject that pastors will either deal with last or they won't deal with at all, Jesus dealt with it first. Mostly because Jesus didn't have any strings attached. And Jesus pointed out that, once again, a light view of marriage will lead to the heavy sin of adultery. And I am absolutely convinced that even in the Christian realm today, we have what I would call legalized spouse swapping. Someone has to say it. Someone has to just give us the mind of God on this. That's why when we do a marriage conference in our marriage book, the whole point is not just for you to have a happier marriage. The purpose for us is for us to learn the concept of holiness through the realm of marriage. If God instituted marriage, then first of all, we need to be concerned with what He is concerned about the most, and that is His glory. We love you guys. We're not here to give you any message of condemnation whatsoever. But someone has to say it. Someone has to be bold, that has no strings attached to them, that says that, once again, a light view of marriage will lead to the heavy sin of adultery. And of course, I understand